Secretary General, News Agency Interfax Ukraine, Irina Sommer. I have a question on the statement on NATO Ukraine Commission, where ministers said that they agreed on the concrete measures to help Ukraine to enhance their ability for its own security. What it means? What in these words we can see what kind of concrete measures?
You will see that worked out in the coming weeks, months, years. But in concrete terms, we are speaking about supporting transformation of Ukrainian armed forces into modern and effective organizations, able to provide a credible deterrence and defense against military threats. We will enhance the ability of Ukrainian armed forces to work and operate together with armed forces from NATO allies. In that respect, we will offer greater access to NATO exercises. We will invite Ukraine to participate in development of military capabilities. We will provide capacity building of Ukrainian armed forces, and a possibility is also deployment of mobile training teams as and when appropriate, just to mention some examples.
German news agency, DPA.
Yes, I'm Dieter Ebeling from DPA, the German press agency. Secretary General, is my understanding correct that in case of a military recommendation to deploy and reinforce military assets in eastern parts of the alliance, this would require another consent and agreement of the North Atlantic Council, or is that something that could just go ahead since it has there has been some decision today? And given the fact that some member countries were very much in favor of a, let's say, low-key approach to the whole problem, how confident are you that all member states would, for example, back the deployment of military assets in eastern countries?
First of all, let me stress that all allies have expressed a very, very strong commitment to collective defense. And I feel confident that NATO allies are ready to take the necessary steps to make sure that we can provide effective defense and protection of all allies against any threat. That's the first point to make. Next, today we have tasked our military authorities to come forward with proposals and give advice as to how we can further strengthen our collective defense. In my introduction, I indicated in which direction. It includes update and further development of defense plans, enhanced exercises, and also appropriate deployments. But finally, of course, in NATO as well as in all member states, we exercise political control of military decisions and military proposals. So at the end of the day, pending, of course, the outcome of the military advice, it will be subject to political discussions and political decisions.
Radio Free Europe.
Secretary General, you have in the statement saying that you agreed a package of measures aimed at deepening your cooperation with other NATO partners in Eastern Europe. Does that mean Moldova, Azerbaijan and Armenia? And if so, what sort of package of measures, what does it mean concretely?
Yeah, it means Moldova, Armenia, Azerbaijan. But let me stress that this is actually not anything new. We have already well-established partnerships with all of these three partners. And actually, we have been working on enhancing our partnerships for quite some time with a view to our summit in Wales in September. So we are speaking about enhancing our cooperation within the framework of the existing partnerships, and that includes the usual measures such as assisting these countries in promoting defense reforms. As regards Moldova, we have also assisted Moldova in the destruction of dangerous pesticides, just to mention an example. So it's a very broad range of cooperation activities, and today we have adopted documents that will further enhance that cooperation with these partners.
Reuters.
Reuters. We're trying to get a sense of what exactly does this suspension of cooperation, of all practical cooperation with Russia means. Does this mean that the alliance will no longer cooperate in areas such as counter-narcotics in Afghanistan, or the helicopter project, or other areas of cooperation in Afghanistan, for example?
I would expect the counter-narcotics projects to continue. It also involves other countries than Russia, and I think Russia has a very strong interest in continuing our joint efforts in countering drugs trafficking. I would also expect the Afghanistan-related cooperation projects to continue. The transit arrangements as well as the helicopter project, also because we have a joint interest in ensuring success of our mission in Afghanistan.
NPR.
Hi, Terry Schultz with NPR and CBS. Could I clarify, suspension of practical cooperation will then not mean all projects, if what you're saying is correct, that some programs will continue. But that wasn't my main question. That was just sparked by your last answer. You have the NAC already threatened this kind of suspension, or suspended most working level cooperation, and that did nothing to sway President Putin. I mean, won't it really come down to Russia knowing how far you are willing to go militarily? What assets are you talking about possibly deploying in the frontline states? What's the bottom line on how far NATO's planning is going to go in terms of military contingencies? Thanks.
Yeah. First on the range of the suspension. Yes, the NATO Council decided some weeks ago to suspend practical level cooperation within the NATO-Russia Council. Today we have broadened it to also covering the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council and Partnership for Peace. And the second...
Just that little military question.
Yes. Yeah, but that's premature to make any announcements in that respect, because what we decided today was to task our military authorities to come forward with the concrete proposals and concrete advice, as regards enhancement of collective defense. As you know, we have already taken steps. We have enhanced air policing, we have improved surveillance, just to mention a couple of examples, and now we ask our military to come forward with proposals as to how we could possibly further enhance our collective defense, and until they have presented their concrete proposals, I think it would be a bit premature to make any announcements.
BBC, last question.
Jonathan Marcus, BBC. Just to clarify, because with respect, there's a lot of sort of NATO speak here. For ordinary people, you talk about making the Ukraine military more effective, more able to defend itself. Do you rule out the supply of weaponry to Ukraine? That's one question. And the second question, I was very struck by the Polish foreign minister's comment that the only NATO installation in his country was a conference centre. Do you foresee NATO's footprint in many of these countries becoming more significant in the months and years to come?
Yeah. One of the examples we have presented is that we will enhance exercises, and you saw a very concrete demonstration of that last year in November. We organized the so-called Steadfast Jazz exercise, and it took place in Poland. That's an example of more visible NATO presence in parts of NATO territory where we didn't conduct such exercises previously. And I think you will see more of that in the future. Actually, as part of our preparations for the summit, we have prepared a so-called Connected Forces initiative, which includes enhancement of exercises in the future. And that might also include exercises that will take place on territory of what you still might call newer member states. On weaponry, I can tell you that NATO as an organization does not possess weapons, generally speaking. We have certain capabilities, such as the AWACS aircraft, but military equipment is owned by NATO member states. So delivery, or a possible delivery of equipment, is a bilateral arrangement between NATO allies and their partners.
Thank you very much indeed. Good evening.